This is really one of the first times in Canada where the legal case against mandatory vaccination has been brought before a legal tribunal, like a Labour board, which applied the principles of Canadian government to find that, in fact, these vaccine mandates are improper and that they cannot be enforced. And so that the Labour board issued a cease and desist order so that these cannot be enforced by a public employer, a large public employer, against these workers. If you're available for work and your employer tells you, no, I'm not going to let you work and go home and we're not going to pay you, to me, that's indistinguishable in fact or law from being dismissed. So the decision that just came down recently, that I just learned about it a few minutes before I came on with you, is very important because it's going to put a cease and desist, an effective cease and desist on this objectionable, vile practice of dismissing workers really in violation of their, not only their human rights, but their employment rights. It's going to impact the cause of every single worker across Canada who is facing these vaccine mandates, not only the ones who are employed in the public service, and there are tens of thousands of those, but I think also there will be a ripple effect also in the private sector, because the principles that are applied in a decision like this Labour board, this Labour commission, will also be able to be applied to cases that are brought before other courts, even when they're dealing with private industry employers. The ministerial order requires them to disclose their vaccination status by the 15th of November, which of course is in and of itself a violation of human rights, Canadian human rights, because of course it violates a person's protection, their privacy, because their vaccination status is something that properly should be private and just between them and their doctors. That's one thing. But then, of course, if they don't declare that vaccination status, they would then be subjected to what's called an involuntary unpaid leave of absence, which in my opinion is legal double speak for constructive dismissal. Yes, right before I got on with you today, I received a letter, and this is from the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 2745, and this is respecting a Labour board challenge on designated employees who were issued these unpaid leaves without pay. So essentially, these are workers who were refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine, refused to even declare whether or not they were vaccinated. And so according to the ministerial order that was issued, they were told, look, don't come to work. We're not going to pay you. So what they did is they took up this issue as a grievance with the union, And this letter informs that this past Monday morning, the complaint was heard, that the complaint was brought before the Labour and Employment Board of New Brunswick to challenge the government's move to put designated employees on these leaves without pay, which we say are essentially wrongful terminations, constructive dismissals. And the lawyers for the union presented the case in a virtual hearing that took nearly 3 hours. They were just informed on Monday that they had won their challenge. And the Labour board has declared that the government did not have the ability to make this move. And the board chair issued a cease and desist order. So this means that all the employees who had been sent home under these vaccine mandate orders and told that they were put on involuntary leave without pay are entitled to go back to work. So this is a great sign. First of all, it's disturbing that this letter has not been made public and that the mainstream media has not reported on it. That's disturbing. It's just as troubling that the Canadian government and New Brunswick government have not made this public, because you would think that this would be important information, considering that it affects thousands of employees, really all across, tens of thousands of employees all the way across Canada. So that's troubling. But it's great news in the sense that it shows that this is really one of the first times in Canada where the legal case against mandatory vaccination has been brought before a legal tribunal, like a Labour board, which applied the principles of Canadian government to find that, in fact, these vaccine mandates are improper and that they cannot be enforced. And so that the Labor Board issued a cease and desist order so that these cannot be enforced by a public employer, a large public employer, against these workers.
For those who aren't aware, who are some of the employees, where do they work, who are represented by this union in practical terms? So people who are maybe in similar industries can see that there's some hope on the horizon.
Well, this is significant because, of course, there are of course private employers who are imposing vaccine mandates. Many of them, however, many of the people who we are representing through the Democracy Fund are workers who are public employees who are represented by public unions, and so this decision is going to impact people like the CN workers, people like CP workers. It's going to impact people like nurses. And on that note, we saw some very encouraging news yesterday in Ontario, where Mr. Ford came out and said that they're not going to enforce these mandates as against health workers there. I don't think that was surprising or accidental. I think that the injunction application that was brought there, even though it was overturned, I believe that behind the scenes, the nurses union put a lot of pressure on the Ontario government to make that decision. But of course, that's a very encouraging sign. We saw also this impact the Quebecers, the situation with health workers in Quebec. It's going to impact the cause of every single worker across Canada who is facing these vaccine mandates. Not only the ones who are employed in the public service, and there are tens of thousands of those. But I think also there will be a ripple effect also in the private sector, because the principles that are applied in a decision like this Labor Board, this Labor Commission, will also be able to be applied to cases that are brought before other courts, even when they're dealing with, private industry employers.